Good evening, everyone. You're very welcome to our first in our series of Let's Talk Sheep webinars. I'm your host for tonight, Ciaran Lynch, and the focus tonight is on really planning ahead for sheep housing, feed management, and how we transition that yoke through mid-pregnancy. I'm joined by my two colleagues, Michael Gottstein and Damian Costello. Gentlemen, you're both very welcome on. Might just get you to turn on your cameras. So
Yeah.
we're going to...
Thanks, Ciaran.
Thanks, Ciaran.
So, gents, we're going to split tonight's talk. Damian, I think you're going to go first and cover the sheep housing aspect of some of the common pitfalls, a bit of advice in that area. Michael, I think you'll be joining us later on to cover the nutrition aspect of it. Again, look at the Q&A tab is at the bottom of your screen. If you want to ask either Michael or Damian questions, if you just type your question into the Q&A tab, I'll ask it on your behalf. Damian, we might ask you a few at the midway point, and then we can do a wrap-up session with both of you at the tail end. So, yeah, we have your slides coming through, Damian. Damian, look, we'll hand it over to yourself, and I'll chat to you at the midway point.
Okay, thank you very much, Ciaran, and good evening, everybody. So, as Ciaran said, I'm just going to cover maybe some of the practical aspects of planning for the housing of ewes and some of the practical elements. First of all, I suppose, what are the factors that determine when you house your ewes, or and a couple of things, I suppose, is in terms of grass supply, which is very much a function of the stocking rate on the farm. Other things to be considered, I suppose, and I'll talk a little bit about body condition score and keeping an eye on that, particularly at this time of the year where marsh lambing ewes are in the mid-pregnancy stage. Obviously, having enough of fodder supply, whether it be pit silage or hay or bale silage. Straw, again, nobody on the call here tonight needs reminding of the price that was paid for straw this year. Is there adequate supply of straw on the farm to take you over the winter period? And I suppose the weather is a big determinant of when ewes are housed also. Maybe just to a couple of slides, Ciaran, on body condition score, and I suppose just to recap in terms of a couple of targets in particular for this time of the year. A good target for lowland ewes would be that you'd have an average body condition score of 3.5, and as we know, the body condition score is on a scale of 0 to 5, but you'd like to have your ewe flock averaging about 3.5 at mating time, and also having a minimum target of body condition score of 3. So, in other words, having as few ewes as possible that are falling behind the target of the minimum target of 3. You'll see here that there's maybe an allowance for a little bit of slippage in body condition between mating and scanning. It's not to say that we're setting out to bring back the ewes, and it's all very well to say that they can afford a little bit of slippage at that time, but that is only if they start off at or above the target average. And it is really important, I suppose, during this period, probably where mating is completed now on a lot of flocks, between that and the late pregnancy period, keeping an eye on body condition score and managing, I suppose, the outliers, the ewes that are falling below this target of 3 or 2.5 to 3. Just as an example, I suppose, maybe these are just 4 farms that I picked that are participating in the Better Farm program, and just having a look at how they were fixed. We're collecting body condition scores from all of these farms. So they're just identified as farm A, B, C, and D. In 2023, you can see that the average body condition score for A, B, C, and D was 3.3, 3.2, 3.4, 3.1. I think maybe we had fairly favorable weather conditions this back end compared to 2023, and maybe there's a bit of a take your eye off the ball in that people are saying that ewes are in better condition than they were this time last year. But again, maybe that's not In some cases, we'll see here, for example, Farm B, the average body condition score last year was 3.2. It's 3.6 this year, so there has been a substantial improvement there. But let's say take Farm C, they're exactly the same. Farm D are exactly the same, slightly ahead on Farm A. These just describes the changes from year on year. I think the important one to bear in mind, though, is when we break down these figures on a farm by farm basis, you can see Farm B and C have quite a very, very low 2 and 1% of their total ewe flock are at or below a condition score of 3, whereas we see that Farm A has 17% of their flock below at or below condition score 3, whereas Farm D has 25% of the flock at or below condition score 3. So on the face of it, when you look at the top here, you sort of think, well, there isn't much difference there, the averages, but it is important. And as I say, in terms of dealing with these this percentage of sheep, and again, that involves handling the ewes, picking out the thinner ewes. We're not talking about getting too hung up on whether they're a 2.5 or a 3, but picking out these and taking corrective action, because whatever chance you have of building a little bit of body condition score during this mid-pregnancy period, from once you get into the late pregnancy, that ship has sailed, really. You're not going to build any body condition score at that stage. So in terms of mid-pregnancy management, as I said, handling the ewes, separating out the thin ones for preferential feeding. What are the options for feeding? Do you house them? Give them a bit of silage or hay. If you have good quality forage, that should be, when talking like 70 to 75 DMD silage, that should be good enough to build a little bit of body condition. If you have lesser quality forage, and again, the importance, Michael will probably talk about that a bit later, the importance of testing your forage. You may need a little bit of concentrate supplementation. The other option, people may not want to be housing them, they can be supplementing outdoors depending on the grass availability. And again, if you're outdoor supplementing with hay or silage, ensure that you're complying with the cross compliance requirements for outdoor supplementation. Again, it's important to point out here that we're only talking about the percentage of thin ewes. We're not talking about supplementing, but concentrate supplementation just for that small group of thin ewes you have can be an option at this stage. And at a rate of 300 to 500 grams per head per day over maybe a 40 or 50 day period of a fairly basic ration, it's a modest enough cost of maybe €5 to €8 per head. And you'll reap a lot of rewards from this. When it comes to lambing time, when you have less ewes that are in very poor body condition. Again, as I said at the start, weather conditions are a big factor. And if you have particularly inclement weather conditions, it's much easier to put on a bit of condition on house ewes than ewes that are battling outdoors with the elements. Again, I mentioned at the start, I suppose, the cost of straw is at an all-time high, and there can be the temptation to delay housing as a result of this. There is maybe the option, and I'll maybe go through a little bit of a sort of a gradual approach to housing, not housing all ewes in the one go. If you're a bit limited in straw supplies, or if you want to delay housing slightly, and particularly on a farm that there's there is a good bit of grass out there all the time. So it's about prioritising what ewes to house first. The big no-no, I suppose, for people that have started to close up their paddocks for in the autumn for spring grass from mid-October onwards. Under no circumstances should you regraze these fields, because that grass that's grown over the last month or 6 weeks on these closed up fields will be worth far more to you in the springtime. So what to house when you're trying to maybe do this gradual or staggered approach to housing the ewes? As I mentioned already, maybe picking out the thinner ewes and housing them first, because they will get thinner. If they're just on the same regime as every other ewe, the ones that are thin will suffer more. I suppose the second priority maybe you could look at would be older ewes. These are possibly more likely to have teeth issues. And then when you reach scanning time, if all ewes aren't in at that stage, maybe looking at triplet bearing ewes, or based on rattle colour, what are the first ewes that are due to lamb based on rattle colour. Very briefly, I suppose, to recap, this is from the Department of Agriculture, this table. It's just giving guidelines on the straw requirements. And you can see this is a difference between silage and hay. Obviously, you're much higher dry matter feed if you're feeding hay, but on silage it's about 72 kilograms per 100 days per head, and it's 45 kilograms per 100 days where you're feeding hay. So um, again, we'll talk a little bit about it in a few minutes. It's really important that your sheep house is well ventilated, because if you have a poorly ventilated shed, it's really hard to keep the bed dry. You're dealing with a damp atmosphere all the time. And again, we'll talk a little bit maybe about using lime, or potentially some people are putting down a layer of sawdust at the base in order to create a bit of soakage to reduce the straw requirement. I suppose in terms of the housing itself, a couple of things that we always talk about in terms of a checklist, if you like, pre-housing. And again, it's no harm to go through these type of things, and from your previous experience of housing, are there issues that needed to be addressed? So again, firstly, is there enough of floor space? And where there isn't, I suppose the kind of problems you encounter is it's difficult to keep the bedding clean in a straw bedded shed. You can get bullying. The more dominant sheep in the pen will tend to bully the others. And again, if you have 10 ewes mixed in with ewes that are in good condition, 10 ewes can get thinner in this scenario, particularly in overcrowded pens. The second one, and it's a really important one, and Michael will talk a little bit more about it later on in terms of feeding management. Do they have enough of feed space? Can all ewes comfortably eat concentrates at the one time? And where you don't have that, you'll have issues with ewes. The shy feeders, they won't compete, and again, they're suffering from a nutrition point of view. And again, the other issues you can have is the likes of prolapse, and also the metabolic diseases such as twin lamb disease and milk fever. Just again, to cover, I suppose, the Department of Agriculture, again, this is taken from the S146. They have guidelines on the floor space requirements. You can see for large bodied ewes, your typical lowland Joe 85, 90 kgs, they need 1.2 meters squared on slats, 1.4 meters squared per head on the straw bedded shed. So, and you can see for lesser sized ewes, medium sized ewes, it's slightly less. Some people ask us as well, that, in a situation where you keep ewes and lambs in after lambing, so you can just 30% on top of the figures above, where you have a ewe and a single lamb, and a 60% more floor space required for ewes and a twin lambs. There's 15 to 20% less floor space required if you're in the practice of winter shearing your ewes on the farm. So that's just purely from a floor space point of view. Just to run through the feed space ones, and again, if we take the large frame Joe, I suppose, in terms of meal feeding, they require 600 millimeters of feeding space for meal feeding. So if you take the standard 4.8 meter bay, 8 ewes by the 600 will fill your 4.8. So obviously if you've medium sized ewes, you get one or two more to feed in your standard bay, where you're feeding all at the front of the pen. So again, the importance that all ewes able to eat comfortably at one time. And very often when you start your meal feeding, maybe 6 or 7 or 8 weeks out from lambing, it appears that they've lots of space, particularly for twin and triplet bearing ewes. They're going to be getting bulkier and bulkier as they approach lambing time. So it is important to ensure that there is enough of feed space. I'm going to just run through a quick example of measuring the two of them. I have a sketch, but some people ask, as I suppose as well, about where you're supplementing outdoors. And again, the guideline here is 300 to 500 millimeters of trough space per ewe. That's assuming that they have access to eat on both sides of a trough in an outdoor feeding situation. Just, I suppose, if you take an example of a shed, and hopefully it's just I suppose it's a 6-bay shed with a central feeding passage, straw bedded shed. You can see here that they're quite deep pens. They're 5.5 meters deep, and you have a walk-through feed access here. You have a pin divider here. You have a walk-through access here, and a pin divider and a walk-through access. So, more often than not, it's the feed space that's the limiting factor. And I suppose just to take an example here, if we take this particular first bay here, just where you can see my pointer going from stanchion to stanchion over along here is 4.8 meters, 4,800 millimeters. As I say, they're 5,500 deep. You can see my calculation here. I'm taking off 600 millimeters here for the corner. So if you can envisage your 8 ewes feeding along here, the last ewe here is obviously blanking off the first 600-700 millimeters of the walk-through access. So that's why I'm taking off 600. There's a total of 9,700 millimeters. So when you divide that by 600 for our large frame ewes, 16 ewes can feed in this pen. And again, as I say, look, it's a really useful exercise to do, to get somebody with you, pull out your tape, measure the feed access, and see what you can. And look, it's very late in the day for talking about big modifications now, but it can be something simple like an extra trough or a hang-on trough at the back of the pen or something that will feed those extra 2 or 3 ewes. In this particular case, when we work out the floor space, again we're looking at 4.8 meters by 5.5 meters, 26.4 square meters divided by our 1.4 as recommended by the department. So you can see from a floor space point of view, this particular shed will take 18 ewes per pen, in these outside pens anyways. But you've only feed space for 16 ewes. So it is a useful exercise for people to do. And see can they to make minor modifications to add the bit of feed space if they need it. I mentioned earlier on about the being well ventilated. You know, if you're in a damp atmosphere, you'll use more straw, and there can be associated health issues with poorly ventilated sheds. Michael will talk a little bit more about these type of things in the feeding management side of things, but it's important that you have a system that there's constant access to forage provided, whether that's hay or silage, and that it's in front of them all the time. They're not being allowed to run out. Again, are the water troughs cleaned out at the start of the season? And furthermore, are they cleaned out regularly after that? So it is really important that there's a clean water source available to sheep indoors at all times. Because if they don't have that, it can suppress their appetite, and again, the knock-on effects to that are deficiencies in nutrition. Again, slatted areas. Lots of people on it probably have slatted accommodation for sheep. It is important to manage these as well in terms of regularly cleaning out any material that's pulled in, and again checking your floor space requirements. And again, I suppose, are there any bits of repairs and maintenance that need to be completed in terms of penning or latches on gates or lighting that needs replacing or extra feed trucks, or that making sure that that's carried out before the housing period is upon you. Just one slide, I suppose, because there are people I'm sure on that have maybe converted in recent years to organic. Again, outwintering is permitted under organic, but important that you ensure that you're cross compliant in terms of not poaching or anything like that with supplementary feeding that's taking place outdoors. If you are housing in an organic production situation, there's a higher floor higher floor space per animal standard required for the organic. So it's 1.5 meters per head for adult ewes, and if there's lambs, it's further 0.35 meters squared per head. There is an issue, I suppose, and some people will be aware of this. There is an issue. Slatted accommodation in an organic situation for sheep. It's similar to the story with cattle. It's permitted, but in order to be compliant, you must provide an equal or greater area of straw bedded layback. So, in other words, some conventional sheds, be they for cattle or sheep, I suppose, needed some modifications for people that were joining organic. So you must have at least half your animal area must be straw bedded. So whatever area you have in slats, you must have that or a little bit more of a straw bedded layback. And again, it's not a requirement to purchase organic straw for bedding organic sheep sheds. Non-organic straw is permitted. My final slide then, Ciaran, just on a few things on the management of at housing time. It's important that your buildings are cleaned out and disinfected and well before the housing period. And again, allowing them time to dry out is as important as the cleaning of them. It's really important to avoid housing sheep with wet fleeces. It can take up to a week for a sheep's fleece. Sheep that are housed wet, it can take up to a week for them to dry. And again, creating a dampness, and it can create respiratory problems and so on within a shed. Footbathing all ewes before housing is always advised, and if you have sheep that are clinically lame, treat them appropriately. Contact your vet if there's an antibiotic treatment required, and wait until that infection has fully cleared up if possible. To leave them outdoors. At a minimum, I suppose, if you need to get them in, if you could have all the lame sheep that you're treating in one pen, it avoids spreading it throughout the shed. Again, when you're pinning up the ewes, take account of body condition score. If you have a thin group of ewes, maybe keep them in a pen of their own. You're also looking after scanning then at the scanned litter size, just to facilitate more accurate feeding, and Michael will talk a little bit more about that. And if you have, again, a fairly spread out lambing, you can use your rattle colours as a further way to divide them out. Again, using adequate straw to keep the environment dry, and again, lime is often useful in terms of keeping the environment dry and keeping the bedding dry, and in particular along the feed barriers where the sheep obviously spend a lot of time. So look, I'll leave it at that, Ciaran. I'm going to stop sharing, and I'll let Michael take over the story from there.
Thanks, Damian. I might let you just catch your breath for a moment and just throw a quick question when Michael's getting ready. Just for our attendees, again, I'd like to remind you, if you want to ask Damian or Michael a question, you see the Q&A tab at the bottom of your screen. So if you type in your question, I can ask on your behalf. So Damian, just when Michael's getting his slides ready, look, you mentioned a couple aspects. I'm sure we'll come back to more of them in a moment, but like the feed space, one we often talk about, but in your experience, like when you go out to farms, it's probably one of the more common problems you see, that we overcrowd pens, and it's probably a hard sell at this time of year that 8 to 9 ewes across the front of a bay is enough. But in reality, we're aiming for that last 3 weeks really of pregnancy.
Absolutely, yeah. And as you say, when you're in the early stages of housing, as you said there, it may appear that they have lots of space, but as I said, twin and triple bearing ewes are getting quite bulky, and it is a thing maybe that's overlooked. And a lot of people will say, look, it's too late this year now to go redesigning our shed. But we've seen some really simple solutions, like just even a hang-on trough, or even a truck that's thrown in loose at the back of the back of the pen or something like that. When you've dished out most of the feed, it's probably it's possible to jump a gate and feed those last three or four that are going to be they're going to be a real squash if you don't have enough pen space. But I think it is a useful, as I mentioned earlier on, Kieran, as well, it is a useful exercise to actually throw a tape on it, because some sheds are designed in such a way that you, all pens appear to be the same. But even if you can recall on the example I had there, even where you have a walk-through track, the way that one was designed, that they're probably 2 or 2.5 feet wide. The most of them were in one bay, like making one of the bays slightly smaller, I suppose, from a floor space area, and also cutting off a little bit of feed space.
And it's often the shy feeders are the problem ones that are going to get pushed out. Look, I see Michael has the slides ready to go on. There's a pointer up on the screen. Michael, we'll throw it over to yourself. Again, look, for any attendees, Q&A tabs there at the bottom of the screen. Feel free to put in your question. Gents, we'll come back to both of you at the end when Michael's finished his talk. So, Michael, we'll throw it over to yourself now.
Okay. Thanks, Ciaran. Look, I'm going to talk a little bit, I suppose, about more on the nutritional side of and what Damian has been talking about, and kind of the needs, I suppose, of the sheep. That's if I can get my slides to move. So look at, I think lots of people have seen that. That's a kind of an AHDB chart from the UK, basically showing that, really, I suppose, early on in pregnancy, we've very little requirements from either the fetus or the placenta, and then kind of in mid-pregnancy on, we see the placenta starting to grow there. Scanning time usually around kind of 80 days to start. We see the lambs, but they're very small, and it's really kind of in the last third of pregnancy, or maybe a little bit with it, that we see that rapid increase, I suppose, in terms of fetal growth, and that's when, I suppose, the nutrition needs to rise rapidly to meet that. Look at, and Damian already spoke a little bit, I suppose, about body condition, and really important, I suppose, is, what I'm going to be talking about here really is for ewes that are in good body condition. I suppose ewes that are thin at the outset, maybe ewes that are suboptimal at mating time and haven't managed to make up ground. They obviously need to be fed earlier and more preferentially. I suppose in terms of energy requirements, that's the energy requirement there of the ewes during the various different times of their cycle. So you can see dry ewes in early pregnancy, about 0.8 of a UFL. So a UFL is 1 kilo of barley. So it's an energy measure. It's the amount of energy that's in 0.1 kilo, or sorry, in 1 kilogram of barley. So they need about 0.8 of a kilo barley in energy terms, if we were to break it down that way. That's for a 70 kilo ewe carrying twins in good conditions, So I suppose then, as we get into kind of later pregnancy, we see that increase in energy there, going right up to kind of 1.4 UFLs there in late pregnancy, and those figures that's obviously for a 70 kilo ewe. So if we've got so that's a Belclare cross or a Clin type ewe, I suppose. If we're talking about your Suffolk Texel crosses, they're probably 85 to 90 kilos. There's significantly more energy required. And then I suppose in after lambing, we see that they need an awful lot of energy there, and that's obviously because they're producing milk and the feeding the lambs, and that's where the grass becomes really important. And I mean, Damian would already have mentioned that the importance of not regrazing ground that's closed up, so that grass is available for the springtime. So that's the energy side of the house. I suppose in terms of protein, here are the crude protein requirements. So again, look at, I think most sheep are not challenged really until we get to kind of the last 4 weeks of gestation. They're really kind of last 2 to 3 weeks. I think by and large most sheep will be getting enough protein from the little bit of meal and the silage hay, or if they're getting grass outside, provided obviously that they have sufficient roughage to eat. I suppose in late pregnancy it becomes very important then in that kind of last 3 to 4 weeks of gestation, and really important, I suppose, as well is the type of protein. So we often look at crude protein. Lots of people talk about, should I be feeding an 18% or 20% or 22% protein nut or concentrate? And really, I suppose the type of protein that's in that is probably more important than the amount of protein. Okay, so there's two types of protein. There's what we call rumen degradable protein, or that's ruminal available protein. So that's basically protein that's becomes available in the rumen, and the bugs break it down, and the sheep don't really get to eat that protein. What they get to eat is the microbial protein and the byproducts that the microbes produce inside in the rumen. And then we have this, what we call DUP, this digestible undegradable protein. So that's often called bypass protein, and that's basically protein that the bugs in the rumen can't digest, and that the animal, then the sheep herself, will digest that in her intestines in the same way that we monogastrics would digest protein. And that's a higher quality protein when it comes to things like manufacturing colostrum and the quality of the colostrum and that. So, and really, I suppose the best source of that for farmers in Ireland really is soybean meal. Okay, and for that reason, we've kind of said, that we should be trying to get about 100 grams of soybean meal per lamb carried into the diet of pregnant ewes in late pregnancy in those last kind of 2 to 3 weeks, to give them that DUP there, to make sure that they have really good quality colostrum. Okay, and look at, we'll be going through some of the rations. Most rations won't supply that level of soybean meal. So, for the vast majority of people, what it means is either getting a special mix made up with a lot of soybean meal in it, which can be quite expensive, or the other option is just to buy a good quality ration off the shelf, and then basically top it up by sprinkling a little bit of soybean meal on top of it for the last 2 or 3 weeks. The amount of soybean that you'll be using in that situation is probably quite small. Excuse me. This is just an analysis there of the silages that we did some analysis this year on the Better Farm program, as we do every year, in terms of the silage qualities that are coming back. And what we're seeing is that, it was a challenging year in terms of making silages. So these are the kind of parameters that come back, and it's really important that people test their silages and know what they're kind of dealing with. Like, so the dry matter there, you get everything from, quite wet silage, 19% dry matter, to really dry silage is 68.5 dry matter there. Same with the pH, a big range, and pH varies largely with dry matter, so you have to take those two figures into account. Ammonia there as well, some really high ammonia silages, so obviously the nitrogen not gone out of those, and they'll be very difficult to feed and maintain once they're opened. And then on the protein side, 7.8 would be very low protein, 16.5 is probably red clover silage, and the average coming in there at 12. So that, reasonable proteins this year, to be honest with you. I was surprised at how good they were. But in terms of energy, we're relatively low on the energy side of things, and we're relatively low on the dry matter side of things. So a lot of the silages in there, in and around the 69 is the average, a range from 62 to 75. So that's across about 10 farms on the Better Farm program, and it's probably typical, or maybe a little bit ahead of what's kind of out there in the general sheep farm population. And look at any surprises there, really, I suppose no, because this year was a difficult year in a lot of cases. People had intentions of making good silage, and the weather didn't play ball. If we all remember back, the summer and the spring were difficult. There wasn't a lot of surplus grass for taking out for that really high quality silage. And I suppose the upshot of it is that on a lot of farms, we have quite a lot of mediocre silage out there, and mediocre silage for ewes in late pregnancy is really not what we want to be feeding. So that brings me, I suppose, to the next chart. And look at, there's lots of these charts knocking around for people to look at. This is one that I've amended slightly. So look at here on the left-hand side, we have the silage qualities, everything from really high-quality silage, 80 DMD silage, all the way down to really rubbish silage, at 55 DMD. 55 DMD silage means that, 45% of the forage that the sheep is eating is passing out undigested in the dung. So the sheep is doing an awful lot of work to only get kind of half of the nutrients. So but this is kind of where we're sitting with most silages, somewhere between that 65 and 70 DMD. And these are the guidelines for twin ewes in good condition. So, your 70 kilogram twin bearing ewe in good condition need to start feeding a little bit earlier this year if we're on those poor silages. What happens on a lot of farms is we don't really think about feeding ewes until maybe we get to kind of 6 weeks out. and then there's a rush. The ewes have lost a good bit of body condition, and we're trying to feed them up, and that doesn't work in late pregnancy. In late pregnancy, if you start putting an awful lot of feed into ewes, they basically put it on their back or into the lambs, they put it into the lambs as opposed to putting it on their back, and then you're not going to get that increase in body condition that you need. So really important this year is that we try and hold body condition in ewes, so that our thin ewes don't get any thinner, and certainly our ewes that are in good condition, we should be trying to hold most of that, and that's the kind of recommended table, I suppose. So test what silage you have at home is the advice on this particular one. Where you fall in, then really, I suppose, start feeding a little bit earlier this year. In particular, ewes that are in poor condition probably need to be started, 2 weeks earlier than we would with the ones that are in the appropriate body condition. And then I suppose for ewes carrying a single lamb, we'd be starting 2 weeks later and feeding less, and ewes with triplets would be starting 2 weeks earlier. So look, those are the general guidelines, I suppose, around in terms of when we should start feeding and how much we should start feeding. I suppose really important is that we look at the energy value. So, I would find talking to farmers is that we spend an awful lot of time talking about the protein. What type of ration are you feeding? Oh, I'm feeding an 18% or a 20% or a 22% protein ration. And really the protein only becomes important in the last 2 or 3 weeks. And really it's soybean we want at that stage, providing most of the protein. So it's energy that is the most important ingredient in the ration. And this is a traffic light system that we developed basically for farmers to assess the energy value of rations, because it's not something that's going to be printed on a label, or it's not something that is easily measured in a laboratory. And what we've done here is we've a traffic light system. So it's similar to I suppose driving the car, what most of us will do in practice. I suppose green is go, so they're the good ones. You're happy. Traffic light starts turning yellow. I suppose we still maybe chance it. So we're happy enough to have some of those in there. But red, we definitely want to be stopping. So what we're looking for in a ration is to have most of the ingredients, certainly the ones that are included at high levels, in the green or orange box, and that's going to give us a relatively energy dense concentrate feed that's going to basically supply lots of energy to the ewes. And that's why we're buying that concentrate feed, is to maintain the ewes body weight, keep the lambs growing inside them, and give them the nutrients that they require. Okay, so look, that's a useful system for people when they're looking at a ration, saying, okay, how do I rate this from an energy point of view? Look at what percentage of the, generally we would say the top 5 or 6 ingredients will make up most of the ration. Generally, we'll find once you get to the molasses stage of the ration, ingredients are usually listed in descending order unless otherwise stated. Then we're at very low levels. So for most concentrate feeds out there, it's 5 or 6 ingredients kind of make up the most of it, and we'd be hoping that most of those would be in the green, or certainly a lot of them in the green, and maybe a couple of them in the orange category. What we want to avoid is ones that are in the red category, those low energy ingredients being high up, making up a lot of the ration. Okay, from a protein point of view, I've already mentioned the soybean meal. They're very, very important, and look at, if it's not included in the ration, I wouldn't say that's a deal breaker in terms of buying it, but certainly you'd want to be thinking, okay, I'm going to have to come back in there with a bit of soybean and sprinkle it along the top of the ration, for 2 or 3 weeks before lambing. The other thing, I suppose, often is to talk about the price. And okay, high quality rations might be a little bit more expensive. And I suppose we need to weigh up then, am I better off buying the high quality ration versus a medium but still good quality ration at a lower price, and maybe feed a little bit more of the medium quality ration? So sometimes there's a little bit of sums there that need to be done in terms of figuring that out. But really important is this, and the last line here on my slide, and this is one that Damian has also alluded to, is feed management is probably as important as feed quality. And the way we manage the feed, the concentrates and the forage, are really important and play a big role in terms of how much good we get out of them. you know, and I'm going to talk a little bit about that, you know. So look at, in terms of forage management, really important is chopping it, if we can do that. So chopped silages, you know, precision chopped silage increases intake. If we've got round bale silage, and a lot of silage on sheep farms is made as round bale, if that's chopped, then that improves it. If we can subsequently chop it again, you know, some people have bale choppers that they can chop it up again, then that's better again. The more you chop that, the higher the intake is going to be. All right. But that's just one component. I mean, another one would be access. So very often we would see, you can see here in the picture, a round bale, inside a round bale feeder. And what you can see is starting to look like what you'd see in a kebab shop. You know, the sheep, fair enough, they still have access to the silage at the bottom, but certainly they don't have access to the silage in the upper half of that particular bale, because it's simply outside of their reach. Okay, so that'll happen in round bale feeders, but it'll also happen where we've got linear barriers and the sheep have nuzzled the silage or the hay away from them as they're going through it and selecting out the leafier grass. They'll be pushing it and nuzzling it around, and eventually it'll have moved out of their reach. And it's really important, I suppose, in terms of maximizing forage intake, that they have access to the silage all of the time. Okay, so developing systems that make sure that we keep pushing it into them, maybe putting blocks behind it, putting it into racks where they can reach it or it keeps falling down. All of those things are really important. The other thing is the whole area of removing refusals. So sheep are selective grazers. They'll select the leafy and the most palatable stuff first. And then I suppose as time goes on, they'll start eating the less palatable and the stemmier type forage. So, if we remove that, let's say somebody has got a silage that's coming in there at 65 DMD, if you're willing to take away a lot of the refusals, you can probably make that 70 DMD silage simply by taking away the stemmy stuff and offering them new silage more regularly. And that's, I suppose, where the feeding frequency comes in there. Do you feed it daily, every 2 to 3 days, or weekly? And obviously the longer you leave it there, the silage is going off, particularly if it's poorly preserved, it's going to start heating, and that's going to reduce intake as well and spoil the silage, and also protecting it from rain. Okay, so protecting it from rain, I suppose, is important as well, in terms of maximizing intake, and in particular for sheep that are being fed outside, the hygiene around the feeding. So if the sheep are wading in through muck to get to the feeder and then standing up on the side of the feeder, they're obviously soiling that, and that's also going to reduce intake. So look, at all of these things have an impact on intake, and these are simple things that people can do. Chopping, making sure they have access to it, removing the refusals regularly, protecting it from the rain. If sheep are outwintered, moving the feeder regularly so that it's relatively clean around it, and increasing the feeding frequency, to keep it fresh, and more palatable. And that'll improve the intake and the amount of forage that the sheep are eating. And obviously there'll be less need then to make it up in terms of going in with meal. In terms of space, and look at, Damian has already mentioned space. I'm not going to go through it anymore, really, only to say that by and large, on most farms that we go out to, the sheep do not have enough space. Okay, the sheep do not have that 500 to 600 millimeters that we recommend. On most farms, it's less than that, and that does create problems in terms of sheep getting their fair share of grub, shy feeders getting the amount that they need, but also in terms of creating problems such as prolapse and things like that. The other one, I suppose, that we've mentioned as well is lameness. And look, at lame sheep can't fight for their feed. They spend more time lying down, less time eating, and obviously we need to try and get on top of that. And Damian has spoken about that. And also the water. Think indoors, it's very hard to keep water trucks clean, particularly like sheep will be eating meal and then they're going drinking water. They've got little bits of meal and dust on their muzzles that ends up in the water. They defecate into the water. When we spread bedding in there, some of the bedding will end up on the water. When they're eating silage will end up inside in the water. So it's really important to clean the water so that they have access to clean water. I find the easiest way to do that is to pick 2 days in the week. Say every Monday evening and every Thursday evening. The last job I do before I leave the yard is I empty out clean out the water trucks. And if that's done, then obviously there's a clean supply of water there for the sheep, and that also encourages intake. So look at it, just a little bit on nutrition management in terms of the The issues that we're seeing, so look at, and Damian already alluded to this, body condition. You know, we see that generally ewes lose body condition running up to lambing, and that's fine for ewes that are in reasonably good body condition, where they lose a small little bit of body condition. That's probably a normal process, but certainly for thin ewes, it's a disaster, and really we're trying to keep them and maintain the body condition if we can at all. Avoid prolapse. So we get a lot of phone calls about prolapse and ewes prolapsing really kind of from January, February onwards. And, you know, what are the issues there? Introduce the meal gradually, okay? And that means starting early enough so that you don't have to put a whole pile of meal in. You know, very often we're rushing to try and get meal in because we haven't started feeding, I suppose, when we should do. Having that space allowance, you know, that reduces forcing and rushing and all that type of things, and avoiding rushing and forcing. And again, Damian mentioned that, you know, in particular, that's an issue, I suppose, where people are feeding outside of the shed. So maybe have the sheep in a loose shed and then have trucks set up outside and open a gate, and there's a huge stampede out trying to get to the ration. You know, make sure that there's big wide runs and big wide gates, and that reduces the forcing, and even how you set up the trucks, that they're not jumping over trucks and jumping over each other and banging into each other. All that type of thing helps to reduce those kind of problems as they get heavy in late pregnancy. The other one just is to have CalMag in the ration. Really important to have CalMag available, or a magnesium supplement available in the pre-lambing ration, in terms of just reducing the risk of milk fever, and also we think it plays a role in muscle tone, which should be helpful in terms of prolapse. And I'd be saying a CalMag bucket for hill sheep, ideally. Access to that even before they come down off the hill onto the green ground in the springtime. The other one, I suppose, that we get a lot of queries on is that whole idea of twin lamb disease and / milk fever. I mean, I'm putting the two of them together because I think by and large what we're seeing on most Irish farms is milk fever. It's not twin lamb disease, real twin lamb disease. If you have it, I suppose, generally the ewes don't get up after that. So what we see is milk fever, that if it's not treated quickly, will then become twin lamb disease. Again, look at same things, introduce the meal gradually and build it up slowly. Avoid sudden changes in diet. Split the feeds once you get over half a kilo a day. So really important that we split the feeds at least 8 hours apart, and that's a thing that an awful lot of people don't do. Avoid stress in late pregnancy. Separate out the shy feeders or any lame sheep so that they get preferential access to their food and can consume it. And then I suppose the other one, and I've already mentioned that, is the magnesium, and that's in that section as well, I suppose. I want to talk a little bit, and I'm coming towards the end of my presentation. So if any people have questions, you can put them into the Q&A function there, and Ciaran will go through them. Just a little bit about rating rations. So look, this is generally what we would see. I suppose this is a sample of a couple of rations, and I'm just going to go through them here on the call, in terms of, you go into your local merchant to buy a ration, and this is the printout that comes, you know. So if it's small bags, it's going to be printed on the bags, or if you're buying it in bulk, you're going to get this in a printout. And so what's in the ration? Is this a good feed or a bad feed? So we can see here the first ingredient is barley. So that ration the biggest ingredient in that ration should be barley. So the second most included ingredient then is maize gluten. So our barley would be in the green box, high energy. Maize gluten would be orange. So it's a good feed, but it's just that little bit lower in energy. Distiller dry grains, good source of energy. So green box, beet pulp, a green box, and then rapeseed, we're back in the orange box. Wheat feed, red box, so that's a low energy ingredient, and then we're onto maize, again a cereal, high energy, green, and then palm kernel, and soybean and sunflower seed, pretty low down. So the soybean is our protein of source of choice, but you can see here it's pretty far down the line. In actual fact, it's the 9th ingredient in descending order. So probably not an awful lot of soybean meal in that particular ration. Now, in terms of the rating, you can see it here. I've listed it: green, orange, green, green, orange, and red. Green, red, and green and red again. So look at, by and large, that looks to me to be, you know, quite a good ration. So you can see here, top 5 ingredients are all in the green or the orange box. Okay, there are a couple of reds in there to them, but they're pretty far down the line. So look at, if that ration was coming in at a reasonable price, I'd be saying, looks like a good enough energy ration to me. Fair enough. Look at the soya is quite low, and I'm going to have to go with something a little bit of additional soya in that particular ration as we get close to lambing. This one here now, take it barley. So first ingredient again, barley. So that's high energy, green in the green box. Wheat feed. So here we're in the red box, okay, low energy. And that's the second ingredient there in descending order of inclusion. So you'd be saying, the second highest inclusion level here is a poor quality, low energy feed. Soybean hulls, we're in the orange box. So medium energy, and then our fourth ingredient, palm kernel, and again we're back in the red box. And then fifth ingredient, distiller's grains, which is in the green box. Maize is the sixth ingredient. Rapeseed, we're back in the orange box, and then we see soybean meal coming in here. Pretty far down the line. So again, look at this. I've put them here, listed them in order, and then put that kind of a visual box here. So we've got green, red, orange, red, and for me that's a poor low energy diet, and I wouldn't be feeding that particular ration to my sheep, my ewes, because it's just in terms of the amount of wheat feed and palm kernel in it, it's likely that I'm not going to get that desired performance from it. Okay, and I'm going to have to feed significant quantities of extra concentrates in order to make that up. Okay, so probably a better quality ration on the market for similar money. Shop around, would be my advice in that situation. Look, another example here. Maize, cereal, again, the green box. Maize gluten in the orange box. Distiller's dry grains in the green box. Rapeseed in the orange box. Sugar beet green box, and then soybean meal green box. And then we're onto wheat feed, red box. Barley green box. Palm kernel red box. So again, look at here. What you'll see here is, and it's a trend, there's very low levels, or relatively low levels, of soybean meal in the rations, and that's because soybean meal is quite expensive. So for millers to put it in, it basically means that they have to significantly, at high levels, they have to significantly increase the price of the ration, and a lot of rations they compete on price. But again, I would say this is a good ration. Okay, so if you look here at the box here on the right hand side, we're green, orange, green, orange, green, green. So look at the vast majority of ingredients here are falling into that green and orange box. Okay, there's a couple of reds here, but they're relatively far down. Soya is coming in here at number 6. Again, we're going to have to top up with a little bit of soya. But if that ration was coming in at a competitive price, you'd be saying reasonably good ration there in terms of just from looking at the label in terms of the makeup of it. Now, this is one, I suppose, that we've come across, and this is a challenge, I suppose, that we're seeing a little bit in terms of organic farmers. A lot of sheep farmers now have gone into organic farming, and that means, I suppose, that they need to buy an organic ration. And unlike, I suppose, conventional rations, it's not as easy to go into your local farm supply shop and have a pick of rations that are available. Generally, they're not that widely made and supplied. And this is a ration that comes in small bags. It's imported. And what we can see here is the first ingredient here is showing up as organic wheat. Okay, so all the ingredients here are going to be organic because it's a concentrate feed that's dedicated particularly for organic farmers. The second ingredient here is lucerne. So lucerne is basically alfalfa hay. It's a hay. So what you're seeing here is that the second highest ingredient here is hay. Third one is organic soya. Okay, and we'd be happy enough with that. And then we're on to sunflower, oatmeal, and then we're back onto to kind of maize, which would be in the green box, and then oats green box, peas green box, and then palm kernel we're in the red box. But look at that ration. So first ingredient is green, second ingredient red, green, red, and red again. So I would say a poor feed. Likely to be disappointed with the performance of that ration based that in the top 5 ingredients in that particular ration, 3 of them are in the red box. which are supplying low levels of energy, in some cases very low levels of energy, probably lower than the forages that are available on those farms from an energy point of view, and that particular ration probably coming in at quite a significant price. So what I'd be saying is very important for organic farmers that they shop around, and that they basically identify alternative sources of good quality concentrates available to them prior to needing them. They're not rushing into the co-op to buy something kind of a week before they need to start feeding it. And there's a lot of people out there selling cereal based peas and beans, those type of products at much more reasonable prices. Okay, so look at, in summary, Ciaran, and I'll finish on this slide. Look at the couple of bits of advice for farmers. Whole body condition looking, and that's really important. Manage your feed to maximize the intake and the feed value, and that's very important for the forages. And then feed a high quality concentrate at the right level, and really importantly at the right time. Start in time, start low, and build it up nice and gradually. And the last thing is eliminate any health issues that are there.
Thanks, Michael. I think that was a very useful practical example there at the tail end. We'll just get you to stop sharing your screen. Look, we'll let you catch your breath for a moment. We have some questions already in on the Q&A, and look, if there's any more, feel free to put them in. I know we're ticking on time, but we'll try to get through as many as we can. Damian, I'm going to start with you. Let Michael just get a drink there for a moment. In terms of the pen numbers or pen spacing, is there a maximum amount of ewes can go into one pen, or is feed space the most important thing to consider?
Yeah, look at both myself and Michael have outlined the importance of feed space. Probably for average to small size flocks, we talk about 20 to 25 ewes per pen. But having said that, we've seen larger flocks that have successfully can feed 50 to 60 ewes, and really it comes down to the practicality, I suppose, of feeding them, particularly if it's a one-person feeding system. Can you get that feed out pretty lively to them? So look at there's no that's the general guideline. And the other thing I suppose to bear in mind is when it comes to lambing downtime, if you've big numbers in each pen, the practicality of lambing them down as well. But in 2025, I suppose would be ideal for smaller flocks.
Simple things like trying to catch them or corner them up.
Yeah.
Look, I'll stay with you just for a moment. You mentioned alternative bedding. Wood chip. Now, I'm not sure whether this is fresh wood chip or not, but how practical is that for bedding? Any concerns with it? Is it a runner?
Yeah, I saw that question coming in. If it is very fresh, you'd fear that it could be very sappy and that it can get dirty very quick. It's like a lot of the alternative bedding solutions. I think the questioner mentioned maybe using it underneath straw, which may work out all right. The one word of caution, I suppose, is when you go to land spread it, it's very slow to break down. Ideally, could be used in a situation where you'd be ploughing it down, but when it's land spread, it's very slow to break down the actual wood chip.
Okay, Mike, I might just throw one to you. There's a question around soy inclusion. Can we have too much? I suppose we would expand that one out. Can we have too high a protein level? And if we do hit that higher level, has that negative impact on the O?
Yep. Okay. Yeah. Thanks, Ciaran. So look at, I suppose, yeah, the answer to that is yes. If you have very high levels of dietary protein, what the sheep will do is it'll use a lot of the energy in the concentrate to break down that excess protein into urine and excrete it. Now, generally, you would probably need to have a dietary protein level of about 25 or 26%. To get to that stage where you'd see that actually happening, in terms of reduced animal performance, and that'd be highly unlikely for that to happen. So look at, generally, I think for most people, the problem is we don't have enough soya in the ration. We're recommending 100 grams per lamb per day. So ewes with twins getting 200 grams of soybean meal for the last 2 weeks. A lot of people that are fostering lambs onto singles will also feed the singles that level, just to have them back down, have that bit of extra colostrum and milk, and get them going. And then the triplets, probably somewhere up around 250 grams. Or it's obviously related to birth weight as well. With the triplets, you have smaller lambs and lower requirement for colostrum per lamb, but an overall higher requirement.
Just when you're on that one just slightly related to what you touched on slightly. If you really high quality silage, ewes in good condition with the singles, could you get away with just soya?
Absolutely, yeah. So and you know, people have done that with very high quality silage, even you know 80 plus CMD silage, even with twins, you'd probably get away with it. But you need you need to be brave, and
Yeah.
things need to go right. But certainly, yeah, with really high quality silage and you know good management of that silage, so that they have access to it and they're eating a lot of it, you'd get away with just soya. Look at the amount of soya we're talking about is relatively small.
Mm.
And we're not suggesting that people should start feeding half a kilo or a kilo of soybean meal. Absolutely not. That would be it wouldn't be financially viable, but it would make a mess of the whole situation. So yeah.
Yeah, no, I think point taken. Look, I'll just stay with you for a moment. In terms of feeding hay, we probably talk more about feeding silage, but in terms of feeding hay, how does that compare? Should you up the rates, or where does that sit?
Yeah, so look at hay. Generally, there's a couple of problems with hay. First of all, I suppose generally hay tends to be more stemmier and you know longer growing, and so that's one side of it. That's a negative, and then on the positive, I suppose it's very dry, um, and so you get higher dry matter intake from it. But the flip side of it then also is it can be very hard to feed it in terms of keeping the access to it. Like you know, and I've seen farms where on linear barriers hay was available and the sheep just kept dosing it out, and you literally had to be there 5 or 6 times a day just to push it back into them, in particular as they had the leafier stuff picked out of it. So look, I would say, you know, generally the hays would be at the lower end in terms of the dry matter digestibility, so you will be looking at it as kind of lower quality silage, and obviously feeding a little bit more concentrates then to make up for that. Like,
Okay. Damon, we'll just throw one back to yourself. I have a question in here on, you mentioned layman. Does have any impact on lameness? You're on mute there, Damon.
Yeah, it does. I suppose, you know, look at it's more from the point of view of keeping the bedding and the environment really dry. I suppose there is a certain disinfectant property in layman, but there has been shown to be, because of the fact that it keeps the bedding material that bit drier. It has a positive impact on lameness. Yeah.
Okay. Michael, I've just one in here on, look, it's questioning about the cereals. Oats is something that's often commonly used in rations. How does that compare to maybe barley or maize? Has it any impact on lamb vigor, or is it just more important to focus on energy and the quality of the ration?
yeah, so look at, I mean, generally when we look at oats and even do the analysis on it, it probably comes out a little bit less in terms of energy than the other cereals, you know, in particular your barleys, maize, and wheat. But I mean, traditionally oats would have been used, and people would feel that they get a good bit of life and all that. I suppose the most recent work, and our colleague Frank Campion would have been involved in some of this work when he was doing his PhD in UCD, would have shown that, you know, while oats is a useful energy source, generally it's not the right type of energy for ewes, you know, in terms of driving milk yield and stuff like that. So while, you know, there are quite a lot of farmers who like to mix oats in with you know, the nuts, I would steer away from that. If you have a good quality nut, you know, maybe there's a bit of oats inside it, that's fine. But in terms of buying, say, a 16 or 18% or 20% protein nut, and then deciding to mix kind of 25% of whole or cracked oats in with it, not a great idea in terms of, you know, you're unbalancing what you have there in terms of what's balanced. And generally oats is maybe not the best source of energy for ewes in late pregnancy in high quantities.
Okay, we have a couple more questions coming in. I'm conscious of time, so I might just get you to keep them brief enough if you can. Michael, feeding beet pulp or feeding beet TOs in late pregnancy, any words of caution on that?
Not really. Look at beet pulp is high in calcium. So look at when you're feeding any of these rations, the important thing is that you start early out and you introduce them gradually and build them up over time. Obviously, your calcium phosphorus ratio would need to be correct if you're doing that, but no issues with feeding, you know, beet pulp as a part of a proper balanced ration in late pregnancy.
The CalMag bucket you mentioned, any recommendations around that?
Just any high CalMag, any high mag bucket. Look at most buckets are somewhere between 8 and 15% magnesium in them. The higher the magnesium, the less likely they are to leak it. But you know, most of those are pretty well formulated. Any of the high mag buckets that are suitable for sheep, not the cattle ones, because some of the cattle ones will have high copper in them. So make sure that it's a bucket that's suitable for sheep. And if you're an organic farmer, make sure that it's a bucket that is approved by your certification body.
Okay, just a practical one maybe for you as well. if you had to top up one of those rations with soya, any practical tips on how you would feed that? Would you go first with it, mix it through the ration?
Yeah, generally I do 2 runs on it, and it works quite well. The thing is, you probably have to feed pen by pen, so you have 2 buckets going. Your first bucket with the ration, and then your second bucket with the soya that you're sprinkling along the top as you come along. We've had that discussion with some of the farmers in the Bet Farm program who felt, they feed the whole shed with the nuts, and then by the time they come back to start with the soya, maybe some of the sheep have stopped eating and are standing at the water truck drinking water. So really, I suppose you'd be doing it pen by pen.
Damian, I'm going to throw the final one to you. It's just a question about condition score. If you were on target early in the year, could you really lose a lot of condition between now and scanning or even later pregnancy?
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, as I said, this time of the year, the outliers, the ones that are below target, need to be identified and dealt with. But again, it's important to keep an eye on it. Particularly with those type of ewes, if there is, it's about monitoring it really, Ciaran. If you have really good quality silage, fed either outdoors or indoors, it will be. But if you have thinner ewes or ewes that are starting to get thinner, you ask the question, why are they getting thinner? Is there some issue there, or their teeth issues? And pinning them separately, starting feeding them a bit of concentrates earlier is probably the way to avoid it.
Yeah, look, I think that's the point both yourself and Michael touched on. It's a small investment early on. It could solve a lot of problems. Maybe as you come closer to lambing.
Yeah.
Okay, gentlemen, we've gone over the hours we have, but look, there's a lot of questions coming in tail end. Thank you very much for your presentations. This webinar is recorded, so there's a question up about the slides. You'll be able to watch it back on our Teagasc YouTube channel. It should be loaded next week, so it'll be available for everybody. We're going to join you again on the 15th of January, where our focus will be on flock health. But for tonight, that's it. So I'd like to thank our speakers first, Michael and Damian, our attendees tonight, and particularly those who asked questions. So see you again on the 15th of January. Good night, everybody.
Okay, good night.